We've got our view request button visible on the screen, but there's just a little bit of a styling issue here, where it appears that the button is sandwiched up way too closely to the card right above it. If we go back to the semantic UI documentation and look up the grid section again, we can scroll down to the content section in here and eventually find a short little article about rows. So the purpose of a row in the context of a layout is to make sure that there is some discernible space between every grouping of content. So in this little diagram right here, these two little boxes that you see form one row that spans from the left to the right. They then create a second row underneath that has another three boxes right here. When we place a row, we automatically get some amount of space placed between each row. So if we take a look at the markup that they actually use, they place a grid. They then place two separate rows inside that. So here's row number 1 and row number 2. And then they place an arrangement of columns inside of each of those. So if we go back to our campaign show component and add in this concept of a row, this whole spacing issue will be automatically taken care of for us. So let's do that really quickly. All right, so here is the render method of my campaign show component. So I'm inside the pages, campaigns, show.js file right now. Here's the grid, and then we've got column 1 and column 2. So we want these two columns right here, the list of cards, the list of cards right here, and the form to appear in their own row. So they should be right next to each other. So I'm going to wrap both these columns inside of a grid.row. So here's grid.row. Then underneath the bottom column, so here's the second column right here, I'm going to close that tag off. And then I'm going to indent both those columns in. Now we're going to create a second row, and the only purpose of this second row is going to be to contain the button that we just created. By making this second row, it's going to give us some visible standoff or separation between the two. So after we close off that row, I'll then create a second one, grid.row, and close off grid.row. So then inside of this second row right here, I'm going to go back and find my link tag, the anchor tag, and the button that we just added in the last video. I'll then cut all this and put it into that second row. Now I'll save this file and we'll go check out the result in the browser. And very quickly you'll notice, yep, it sure looks like we got the right thing. However, there's just one last thing to be aware of here. You'll notice that the button is a little bit out of bounds. So it's a little bit farther off to the left-hand side. So whenever we use a row like this, we have to wrap elements inside of it in at least one column. So we have got a row right here. Inside the row, we must place a column, and then we can place our actual content inside of that. So I'm going to make sure that I just wrap my link tag with a grid.column. Now this one doesn't need a set width specified because there's no other competing columns that are also going to be placed inside this row. All right, so let's save this. And now back over, everything is nicely lined up. Okay, so I think this component or this page right here is all good to go. And I think we're now ready to move on in earnest on the request list page. So let's continue with that component in the next video.